everybody, welcome to my channel. My name is Alex and today I'm going to be going through my April wrap-up. Now in the month of April, it was a pretty busy month for us. It was my son's birthday and then we went on vacation pretty much immediately after that. And I had a little bit of extra work that I did this month, so it was kind of busy all around, but I still did manage to fit in 10 books this month, which I'm really happy with. And my average rating for the month was 4 stars. So pretty good reading month in that regard. However, I did have my 2 least favorite books of the year so far. So you win some, you lose some. But I am just going to go through these books in the order that I read them. I also participated in the Owl's Magical Readathon this month, and I actually didn't look at the careers before I started reading. I just picked out a book for every class, and the ones that I managed to complete are the ones that I get to move forward with, and I'll pick a career from there. But as I go through, I will let you know if they counted for the readathon and what challenge they fulfilled. So without further ado, let's get started. The first novel that I read in April is Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren. I listened to this one on audiobook through Scribd. This is about a girl named Macy, and she reconnects with an old love named Elliot. We don't really know what happened to them, why they broke up. She won't say anything about it, but the book goes back and forth between then and now. So when Macy meets up with Elliot again, he is really eager to reconnect and figure out what went wrong in their relationship, why she stopped talking to him. She doesn't want to talk about it, but you figure that out through the then chapters. This was my first Christina Lauren, and I will definitely be continuing with their work after this book. This one to me was not my favorite romance that I've ever read. I found it to be a little bit predictable. It didn't really do anything that I wasn't expecting necessarily, nothing that really shocked me. Christina Lauren usually writes new adult, but this one is more adult, and there are some steamy scenes in this novel, so if that's something that you're not comfortable with, I would recommend skipping over this one. But all in all, I did enjoy it and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. This book did count for the arithmancy, you know what I'm talking about, for the Owl's Readathon for being a book written by more than one author. Next, I completed Going Bovine by Libba Bray. For the Owl's Readathon, this one counted for the Care of Magical Creatures category because it has a land animal on the cover. This story follows our main character, Cameron, who towards the beginning of the novel is diagnosed with mad cow disease. So you follow him learning about the diagnosis and that there is no cure. And then you follow him as he goes on a journey. There is an angel type figure that appears to him and tells him that if he goes and finds this man, that he will have the cure for his mad cow disease. You never really know whether this is actually happening and it's fantastical, kind of a magical realism element, or if Cameron is going kind of in and out of a stupor because of his mad cow disease. You never really figure that out because as you're going with him through this journey, you also get flashbacks kind of him in the hospital that kind of takes you out of it. So that part is never really clear, which I did think was interesting going into it. This is an older work by Libba Bray. I think it's almost 10 years old, if not 10 years old at this point. If you have read any of Libba Bray's other work, you can definitely tell that this is an older work from her. I don't think that her writing style is quite as well developed as it is in her later novels, like the Diviner series, but overall, it's not bad writing, it's just don't go in expecting Diviner's level quality writing. I'm gonna be honest, going through this book reading, I kind of imagined that that would be what a trip would feel like, because just the craziness and the antics that he goes through, the way that it kind of all ties together eventually in the end, it's just a wild ride. And I think that might be kind of the point. It was just definitely an interesting reading experience. So if you were into, I feel like it's kind of the same humor as like anything by Jesse Andrews. If you're a fan of that, I feel like this style kind of mimics his writing. So overall, I did enjoy it and I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Next, I read Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. I have been wanting to get to this one for so long and it finally happened. For the Owl's Readathon, this one fit into the Defense Against the Dark Arts, which was a title that starts with R. And in this book, we are set in the year 2045 and we're following a character named Wade Watts. This teenage boy lives in a world where it's basically a dystopian world. The conditions are really terrible. Everything has kind of gone to shit. And there is this virtual reality called the Oasis, where pretty much everybody goes into like a VR headset, and that's where Wade goes to school. That's where some people go to work. Some people just live their lives on there. That is the big thing that's happening in the society. And at the beginning of the book, the creator of the Oasis passes away, and he releases this video that says that he has hidden some Easter eggs inside of the Oasis. And the first person that can win the game, find all the Easter eggs, will get access to the Oasis, become crazy super rich, and basically they're going to be set for life, whoever wins this game. Now, I have wanted to read this one for a really long time, but for some reason, I don't usually pick up sci-fi. Every time I have read sci-fi in the past, I have super enjoyed it, but it's just not something that I immediately gravitate toward, which is why I had put this one off for so long. But getting into it, it was genuinely as good as all of the hype makes it out to be. One worry that I had with this was hearing a bunch of people say that there were a lot of 80s references, and that is true. There are a bunch of 80s references hidden throughout this book. I was not alive in the 80s, and I don't know a whole lot about the 80s, but I don't feel like I missed out on anything because of that fact. I feel like I had just as great of a reading experience, even if I maybe didn't catch every single reference that was made. Still feel like it was phenomenal, very well done. The pace was just perfect. It moved along so well. There are twists and turns that you just don't expect. There's some really good representation in here. Just in general, a really well-crafted story, and it became really addicting to me going to the end trying to see what happens. So if you have not read this one yet, I would definitely recommend it, whether you are already into sci-fi or you're just trying to get into sci-fi. Either way, I feel like this is a really valuable piece of work in that sci-fi genre. Really enjoyed this one, and I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was This Savage Song by Victoria Schwab. This For the Owls fit into the Transfiguration category, which was to read a book with sprayed edges or red on the cover. This book follows two main characters named Kate and August. They live in a world where humans exist and monsters exist, and they don't like each other. Kate is a human and August is a monster, and they almost find themselves wanting to be what they're not. They are from families that rule each side of the conflict, and they find each other. There's no romantic relationship in this, but they do kind of form a bond trying to work through this world together and kind of fight with their beliefs, what they've had pushed on them their whole lives. I probably have an unpopular opinion about this book. I didn't like it that much. I felt like it took forever for anything to actually happen. Like, there was setup in the beginning, introducing the characters, introducing the world, and I get that, but it really didn't feel like anything happened at first. I listened to it on audio and I was getting like hours and hours in just waiting for any real action, and I didn't feel anything. For a fantasy, you would think, or a magical realism, urban fantasy, whatever you want to call it, I would think that this would just move a little bit faster and have a little bit more action. I know that this is a duology, but still I wanted a little bit something more, or just wanted some of like the filler to be taken out. And partially because of that, I didn't feel attached to our main characters. I felt like I was just kind of seeing them go through their day-to-day lives, but not really getting anything of substance at first. And it really made me struggle to actually connect with them, to care about anything that they cared about, to care about them when they were in trouble. Like, I just didn't find that I cared about them or about anything that was happening to them. And I was really hoping when we got towards the end, since I know it's a duology, I was hoping that the ending, the epilogue, would really hook me and intrigue me to go into the next book, but it just really did not do that for me. I just found that I really didn't care about what happened in the epilogue, about really any of the events in this book. I read this one towards the beginning of the month, and it really isn't that memorable to me. I remember little bits and pieces, scenes that happened, but nothing really major, nothing that would make me want to continue on with the series. I know it sounds like I'm just all bashing this book, but I did enjoy the writing style. Victoria Schwab is a very talented writer. I've read a few other works of hers that I have really enjoyed, so that aspect of it I really did like. And parts when action did actually happen were really like on the edge of your seat kind of scenes that I really enjoyed reading, but the in-betweens and the transitions just they just kind of lost me. So all in all, if you are a Victoria Schwab fan, or if this plot sounds like something that you would enjoy, I would recommend giving it a shot, but maybe just know that it's not for everyone. Everyone else seems to love it, but this one just wasn't for me, and I ended up giving it a 2.5 out of 5. The next book that I read, I actually have with me, and it is The Ghosts of Heaven by Marcus Sedgwick. For the Owls, this fell into the divination category for something set in the future. I'm bending the rules a little bit because this one is only set partially in the future. This novel follows 4 different storylines. You get one prehistoric era, one from the 17 or 1800s when the witch trials are happening, one from the 1920s, and then one set in the future. And they all have a spiral connecting them. That is the main theme of this book. And you get to see how the spiral binds all of these characters together and makes them kind of fit into each other's storylines. One thing that I think is interesting about this book is in the introduction, Marcus Sedgwick says straight out that these 4 parts of this book do not need to be read in any particular order. You can read them the way that the book has them placed, you can read them backwards, you can read them whatever way that you want to, and the story will still make sense to you. That was really interesting to me. I personally just read it front to back. So the order that I listed the sections is the order that I read them in. But you can hypothetically read it any way that you want to, and it will still make sense for you. I did really enjoy this, which surprised me because typically I don't enjoy short story collections, which is what the introduction made me feel like this was going to be pitched as. But it did not feel that way. Even though you're following 4 different characters, they're not related, they're in completely different situations, you do see little Easter eggs of each of the characters popping up in the other one's stories, which made everything feel very connected. It was actually really interesting. Some of the stories I did enjoy more than others, but regardless, I enjoyed all of them. Marcus Sedgwick is very talented in his way that he can weave the stories together like this. I was very impressed. I've never read anything else from him before, but I'm definitely going to have to go back and read some more of his backlist. I have not heard anybody talk about this, so if you are interested in fantasy, sci-fi, historical fiction, really anything like that, I would give this a go. This is definitely underrated, and again, may not be for everybody. I can definitely see some reasons why people wouldn't like it, but if you're at all interested in that premise, I would see maybe if your local library has it, definitely go and try to pick it up. So overall, I ended up giving this one a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read is probably my favorite of the month, and it is The Nowhere Girls by Amy Reed. This book initially follows Grace, who has moved from Kentucky to Oregon after some drama in her family's church. When she gets there, she discovers some writing on the walls of her new home and discovers the story of Lucy, who is a girl that used to live in her house and in her town. And Lucy actually accused 3 of her classmates and local athletes of rape. And after that incident, she and her family moved away and nobody has heard from them since. That is the catalyst that gets the story moving forward, and you also get to follow Grace as she meets up with 2 new friends, Erin and Rosina. Once these 3 form a bond, they start an anonymous group called the Nowhere Girls, where they try to get these incidents out in the open. They want to come together to fight back. They're wondering why Lucy was never really listened to, why nobody took her seriously, and they're wanting to find these guys or stop them from letting this happen again and really just let their voices be heard. I found this novel to be incredibly powerful and incredibly important. Obviously, there are huge trigger warnings for this book with rape and sexual assault, even some verbal abuse in some spots. So if you are sensitive to those things, I would either skip this one altogether or just do a little bit more research on what goes on before you dive in. But I highly enjoyed this. I felt like it was told beautifully. You get sections from each of the 3 main girls' point of views, and sometimes you get little snippets into other girls' perspectives, girls that aren't main characters. You just say she and her. Random girls that are in their school or in their town that go through experiences like this. There is also incredible diversity in this book. None of the categories of diversity I can personally speak to, but they are there. And if you are interested, it does discuss faith quite a bit. Grace comes from a Christian background and her faith is discussed all throughout the book. Rosina is a Latina girl who talks about her race quite a bit, and she is a lesbian, which comes into play. And Erin has Asperger's. So if you're interested in learning about any of these, maybe look for some Own Voices reviews or just go into the book. I loved the way that all of those were represented. I felt that they were placed appropriately. They were important to the story. I really appreciated the way that this was done, the narrative that it took, and how it handled all of these sensitive topics. So all in all, if you haven't picked this one up, I would very, very highly recommend it to you. Anybody and everybody, I really can't recommend it enough. Obviously, I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. And this one for the owls fit the herbology category with a plant on the cover because there are flowers all over it. Next, I read The Star-Touched Queen by Roshni Chokshi, I think is how you say it, and this fair for the astrology category with a title with star in it. This one was actually a reread for me, or a re-listen. I had listened to the audiobook a couple years ago, and I found that nothing just really stuck with me, so I wasn't sure if that was just that I wasn't paying attention or if it was something with the book. So I decided to return to it and see what the outcome would be. This book follows Maya, and Maya is cursed. She has a bad horoscope, so everyone in her father's kingdom thinks that she is evil, whatever. Nobody wants to be around her, she can't keep a tutor for very long, and she's just generally just had a bad life because of this bad horoscope. Her father actually sets her up in a arranged marriage for political reasons, and that just kind of makes the book go from there. She gets married, she finds all these secrets and deception, and it really goes into a really fantasy-like place. You get threads from people's lives and how they are wound together to get your destiny, and it really goes somewhere. It's really hard to describe if you haven't actually read it. It's hard for me to even describe, and I've read it twice. The second time around still felt like this just did not stick with me. I didn't feel like I cared about any of the characters again. There are a couple of memorable scenes that I feel like were done really well, and Roshni Chokshi has very powerful and very flowery writing. So if you are not a fan of flowery writing, you are not going to like the way that this is written. As much as I really wanted to like this book, I just all in all in the end just could not find that I cared about the characters or what they were going through. It was so hard for me to actually pay attention to what was going on because I just didn't care. So there is nothing inherently bad or good about this book in my opinion, the way that I personally read it. So I do not think that I'm going to be continuing on with the next book in the duology. I ended up giving this one a 3 out of 5 stars, which is the same rating that I gave it the first time. Next, I read my other favorite book of the month, which was Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. This one was in the charms category for an adult work, and if you've watched my booktuber challenge video, it was also in that one. This book is an adult high fantasy, which follows a lot of storylines. We are in a world where the magic system has to do with colors, and the more colors you have and the more breaths you have, the more powerful you are. And we start out the story with two sisters named Viviana and Siri. Viviana is the older sister, and she has been told her entire life that when she turns either 18 or 20, I can't remember, she is going to be married off to the god king of this other city. Viviana's father, who is also a king, decides that he cannot send Viviana. He cannot bear to let her go. So he decides to send Siri, who is the youngest sibling in the family. So Siri ends up going to meet and marry the god king and potentially produce him an heir. So you learn about Viviana, you learn about Siri, you learn about other gods that are in the realm with the god king, and so much political intrigue, so much plot development, character development, twists and turns. This was a ride. This book is almost 600 pages, but it is a incredibly developed fantasy novel. It is kind of slow moving just because there's so much that you need to digest and go through. Sometimes in books like this, when you follow multiple characters' perspectives, I find that some of them I really love and some of them I don't care about at all. This did not do that for me. I did have one that I liked a tiny bit less than the rest, but I didn't just flat out dislike it. I wanted to read about everybody, wanted to know how everything was going to come together, and just the history behind this world and the magic system and everything is so well developed, so well thought out. This was my first work by Brandon Sanderson, and I highly recommend it. Whether you've read Sanderson before and you just haven't read this, or if you've never read Sanderson before, just go for this one. I was intimidated at first because I don't usually read adult high fantasy, but there was really nothing to be worried about. The way that it's done is beautiful. I didn't feel like there was any info dumping. I felt like I could follow the storyline as complicated as it got. It was really just beautifully done. So if you haven't picked this one up, I highly recommend doing it, and I can't wait to read more from Brandon Sanderson. Obviously gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars. 2 more to go. Next, I read The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. I, again, had heard a ton of good things about this one. It won an award last year. I think was it the National Book Award or maybe. I'll put it here if it wasn't the National Book Award. This book is written in verse, and it follows our main character, Xiomara, as she is navigating her faith and her family life and crushing on a new boy. It follows Xiomara from the beginning, not really knowing what her passion is, what she wants to do, and then she discovers slam poetry, and you just get to watch her blossom and fall in love with this art form. And with the book being written in verse, every word on every page is placed expertly. It's told beautifully, but it's not confusing, it's not complicated. I absolutely flew through this one. Did not take me any time at all. I loved getting to spend the time with these characters. It feels like a slice of life, but you really get in there with Xiomara and you get to experience what she is. You feel sorry for her, you feel happy for her. Just everything that she feels, you feel. And even if you haven't been in the same situations that Xiomara has been in, I really think that there is a piece of this book that will really connect with you, no matter what your background, no matter what your experience is. I think this is a very important piece of literature. You could probably get this one through in just one sitting. Since it's written in verse, it just goes by so fast. It would not be difficult to get this one done in just a couple of hours. So if you have the chance to get this one done, I would highly recommend it. I also gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars. And that one didn't fit in with the challenge for the owls. I just read it. And the last book that I read in the month of April is Ghost at a Watchman by Harper Lee. This book, I have it, the physical copy, but I actually listened to it on audio, and the audiobook is narrated by Reese Witherspoon. So if you're a fan of her or just want to listen to the audiobook, I would recommend that. She did a very good job of reading the story. This book is set 2 decades after the events of To Kill a Mockingbird, and we follow our main character, Scout, or as she's now known, Jean Louise, as she comes back to her hometown. She's been living in New York. She comes back and reunites with all of our favorite characters and her father, Atticus, and she comes to find out that not everything is as she thought it was in her hometown. There's a lot more tension, a lot more racial issues, and you really get to follow her discovering who she is and trying to stand by her convictions when some of her most beloved people in this town may not feel the same. You really get to see that internal struggle with her, which I really enjoyed. I feel like Jean Louise, some of the things that she says are very thought-provoking. And if you are a fan of To Kill a Mockingbird, it is nice to come back into this to see some of those old characters that we know and love. You do get several scenes in here of Jean and Atticus really talking and reconnecting. Sometimes they're fighting, and it's really interesting to see that because in To Kill a Mockingbird, Scout in To Kill a Mockingbird really adores her father, and he's a very prominent, obviously, part of the book, and he is still the same in Ghost at a Watchman. He's still a very prominent part of her life, and she loves him, but she finds out that maybe they don't hold the same beliefs about everything, and that's difficult for her to gather at first. So you get to see her try to come to terms with everything. That being said, I don't feel like this is a necessary read. If you like To Kill a Mockingbird and you want to go into this one just for a little taste of some more of that world, then by all means, I would recommend going ahead with it, but I don't feel like you need to read this to gather the full story. Like I said, I did really enjoy the audiobook narration. This does have a lot of like Southern phrases and slang, and obviously Reese does that accent very well, but if the little phrases, the Southern sayings and whatever, if that gets under your skin, that might bug you because that is in here quite a bit. But other than that, I think it was well written, it was well done. I enjoyed my time reading it. I don't think it's ever something that I'll return to, and I don't think that it's necessary to gather the whole picture, but if you want to, go for it. I ended up giving this one a 3.5 out of 5, and this one didn't fit in with the owls either. I just read it. So those are all 10 books that I read in the month of April. I did want to go ahead and let you guys know some books that I am in the middle of. I've got 2 that I've started and didn't get to finish before the month was over. So first is A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. Started this one in April, haven't gotten a chance to finish it yet. I haven't been reading as many physical books lately. The only physical book that I actually finished in April was The Ghosts of Heaven, but started this one. I'm just over 100 pages in, so I've got a little bit more to go, but you should be seeing this one in my May wrap up. And then I've also started The Inexplicable Logic of My Life by Benjamin Elliott Sons. I am about a quarter of the way into that one, not quite a quarter of the way. So again, you'll be seeing that one in my May wrap up as well. So that is it for this video. If you stuck around this long, thank you so much for listening. If you have read any of these books or if you're interested, or just let me know how your reading month went in April. I would love to hear all of that in the comments down below. So until next time, bye!